Welcome back to this tutorial. In this tutorial, we'll be cutting out our patterns and preparing the upper part of our shoe. So let's go into it now. Now, you see I'm actually going to lay the pattern we cut out in the last tutorial on a cardboard. I'm going to fold the cardboard so we can get both sides of the shoe, both side of the shoe. You understand? Because the pattern we cut out the other time was for half part of the shoe. So with this, by folding this cardboard, you'll see that we'll be cutting out the full cover for our shoe. So just watch the way I'm doing it. After folding it, you make sure you place the center line part of the shoe at the folded part of the cardboard. Then you make sure you place it rightly. Make sure that nothing is folding. You spread it very well. That's exactly what I'm doing here. You see, there are some few folds, so you can pull it out back just the way I just did. Then you make sure you spread the whole thing. So that's it. Now, if you observe at the edge of this pattern of what I'm trying to cut, this particular place, I discovered that the edge of the side is too bent. So I could easily figure out that I didn't place it rightly, even though from a beginner, if a beginner is looking at it, he is going to think that it is well placed. So I have to remove it. Make sure that the pattern I cut down, that center part is actually falling at the edge, exact edge of the cardboard. Then I now spread it from top down. As you can see, I spread it up from top down. Then can you see that? It's fold there, so I need to spread it and so that's it. Now we have it covered very well. Another reason, so you see that particular place actually went up too much. I'm tracing the exact something out now. Oh, some people might not actually do this particular side, but I love to do this. In case the paper tape actually removed, I can, I already know where the shape is, so I'll cut it out. Now this particular pattern I'm cutting out is actually not the one that we will use. We'll still cut another one, but this one is good for you if you know you'll be doing multiple of these. You'll be doing a lot of this shoe, like you're doing mass production. You understand? It's always good that you have your paper tape that you use to cut out your pattern. You have it, done like this so that you can easily keep this one. After cutting out this one, then we will now use this particular one to cut out our main top, where, and that is where you will be adding our allowance, our folding allowance. We'll be adding it here later. So this is just like a prototype that we can use for other, to cut multiple of this in future. So by opening this, we'll see that it will now cover for the whole, it will cover the whole shoe, just like this. You see that? So that's the shape we'll be having at the end of the day. Then there is a particular, at that middle, you see it actually bulge out. That's what we don't want. So we can easily correct that by using scissors to cut that part off. It's supposed to be to go straight like that, not actually coming out. Then one more thing is, if you remember, we added like ½ inch at when we were actually doing our pattern. During our pattern, we have ½ inch at the right side of the last. Now we will actually remove that ½ inch from the left side. Now you remember we added ½ inch there, then we will remove it here. That is exactly what I meant by I didn't really follow the convention for shoe. What I'm actually doing here is a pattern I really need for this particular shoe. If it were to be normal convention, it would be the other way around, whereby the left side of this right last should go higher, while the right side will actually go lower. I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. But here I'm trying to achieve something with this particular pattern, and that's the reason actually I did it like this. So you see now, then we will now fold our cardboard again. Then we are going to use this pattern and cut out our main pattern for the upper part of the shoe. You see what I'm trying to say now. At the top, we are going to add ½ inch. At the top, we will add ½ inch. Then at the bottom, we'll also add ½ inch. But at the side, we will add between 1.5 inch to 2 inch. You can add between 1.5 inch to 2 inches. So at the bottom, you see I'm adding my ½ inch, then it will go like that. Now, though you might not be able to hold your pattern, then you can staple it to the cardboard and later you will remove it. But because I know I'll be able to hold it, that's the reason I did not actually staple it. So you trace it out like that. You see the way I'm doing it, I'm actually following that mark that I've made. Then at the side now, the side, you can measure between 1.5 to 2.5, but here I'm using 1.5. Here I'm using 1.5. If you have much leather that you can play with, you can still use 2.5, but somehow you might even have to cut it out later. So depending on the measurement of your in shoe, the height of your in shoe could also determine what you will put here. In our case, we are using about half-inch size of insole. So the insole determines what you will use and the extra you want to use under your shoe, under your insole. So here I'm using 1.5. Then as you can see, I will now trace it from the top and from down, just the way I've done here. Then I'll now trace it down, then join the one coming from the bottom to it and cut it out. So you can go ahead and do that. So this is exactly what we have after that. So another thing I like to say, always make sure you label your pattern. So the pattern with the paper tape is what I will definitely keep. I will keep it so that in future, if I want to do more of this, I don't need to go and run another pattern again. I'll just use this pattern to cut it. So I've labeled it. Now you need to cut this. You need to cut your leather with this. But what I'm doing is I'm presently cutting that shape out so that I will know that that shape is at the right side, so you know that you are actually on the right. Even if what I wrote, if later I could not see it or fade out, I can easily know that that is for my right. So let me still say that another reason you see people actually might not follow normal convention like what I did here when it comes to shoemaking is the shape of the leg of the person you are making the shoe for matters again. Although these are the things we will actually be talking about in future in another tutorial. So right now we are about to cut out our leather. So this particular one we are cutting now is the right side. So you are making mark for it now. That's for the right side. Make sure that your pattern did not shift, and make sure that your pen, the ink is visible, so when you want to cut it, you'll find it easy to trace it out. See the way I'm tracing it out. So this particular one now that I traced out with this particular one will actually serve for the left side, because by the time we turn the leather, it will be for the left side. You see that? Then we're now cutting out for the right side now. So you see that I turned the pattern. I didn't use the I didn't place it the way I placed it the other time, so I turned the pattern to cut out the right side. So whenever you're cutting pattern for two legs, you must make sure that you didn't cut for the same, you didn't cut it placing it the same way. You cut it by turning it round. And you see that if you can see, look at it very well, you will see that particular mark indicating which side of the pattern it goes. So we'll actually cut it out now. So if you're following me with this, so you can actually start cutting out your pattern. See, I'm very careful. I don't want to make, I want the cutting to be straight. Also, if you noticed, this particular leather that I'm using is a synthetic leather. When I saw this particular leather in market, I just love it. I think I I really want to do something with it. I love the texture of the outer part, but one thing about this leather is it's so soft, too soft. So if I will advise, if you're making shoe for the first time, make sure you use a real leather to do it, so it will make it even easier to to bend and manipulate. So cut out the other one. After cutting both, this is what we have. You will see that I try to label it. See, try to label it, look at it very well. Then, because the moment you label it, that's just what you'll be looking at. Else you'll actually make mistakes. So that's it. I'm trying to get the center point for my pattern. Have you seen it now? So you see that we actually have our pattern placed rightly. So what I'm doing now is to mark out the what I'm doing now is to mark out the upper allowance, because we are going to fold our leather. So I'm marking the upper allowance to get the exact place. That's the reason I'm using the small pattern, the initial pattern that we cut out. So that's another good use for that particular particular pattern. So after tracing it out like that, you can now add your gum. You see, make sure you, I didn't really measure because I know I can easily get my half inch. I didn't really measure all that one. So that's how you actually do it for the second one also. So go ahead and do that. I'm through with both. Then we have to, why I am actually notching it is for the folding to be easy for me to do. Like I said, I'm using a synthetic leather. Assuming I'm using real leather, I can easily bend it and actually use my rubber hammer to make it look good. But with this synthetic leather, it will be, if you don't notch it like this, you won't have a perfect bending. And because the leather is a soft one, it will actually take, it will take a particular shape that you might not actually like. So we'll now be applying our gums now. Now this particular place I will definitely advise, if you will be sewing this particular place, I will say that you don't use a frosted gum. You can use Chinese gum or bond to actually hold this particular place so that your machine can thread on it easily. Because we will not be using machine, that is the more reason I'm using a full stick here. So after it has dried, then you can now start the folding, the bending or folding anyone. So you see what I'm doing now. Just folding it. Funny enough, I'm not really patient for this thing to actually dry. So I'm just folding it like so. You discover some part of it might not respond to gum like that. I know this thing. I could not be patient for it to just to dry up the way it should. So if you can see, you discover that the synthetic leather is giving me some sharp edge instead of the bent edges. So that's one of the disadvantages if you use synthetic leather, or most especially soft leathers. So go ahead and bend your and fold the upper side. You see that? You see that middle? You see those rough edges that you get? So that's what you get if you are using a synthetic leather. So like I said, I just love the texture of this synthetic leather. More reason I'm using it for this project. Normally, the best thing to use is a good leather, or original leather, or a thick fabric will do it far better. Though by the time we'll be finishing our production, you discover that all those, folded side will not be there again. So that's the way it's going to look on the last. So go ahead and fold the second one. I'm sorry, I didn't know the power supply went off, so I just have to, you know, wait for the power supply to be back before I continue this. So now you are going to take your landing, and you will use your upper leather that you prepare to cut out your landing. Now, another thing I want you to know is you can use the first pattern you cut, but you will have to add half, 1.5 inches to the side. So why I prefer this particular, to use my upper part to cut it, upper leather to cut it out, is they take the same shape, and the landing will take the same shape with it. Now, why you'll be cutting out this landing, I will advise that you don't cut on the exact mark, you cut inside the mark, because you don't want your landing to be, showing outside, or to be longer than your upper. So you cut the inside of the landing. So you see that I'm cutting the inside, not the outside, because if I'm cutting the outside of the mark, you will be seeing the mark on the main pattern, but the mark is actually going with the pieces that I will not be using. That's what I meant by cutting out the inner part of the pattern. Do you see that? The reason for this is that the landing must not exceed, or actually be the same size with the main leather. So That's it. Then we'll now apply gum on our landing. Like I said, I love to use gum. I don't like to manage my gum so that I don't love to compromise things. So you see me applying and making sure that I fill the whole space up with gum. Okay, then pick your leather now, then you add the gum on the leather. Here you might not add much gum to it, just make sure that the gum touches every part. Most especially the upper part and the bottom part, because you will actually want that to actually stick, that particular part to stick with your landing very well. So there must be gum there. At that particular part very well, there must be gum. I actually didn't make sure that I display this particular place because I consider this particular part of this video, this particular side of this section of this tutorial to be very, very important. And that is the reason you see that is close to about 40 minutes. Is highly important because the upper part of your shoe or your slippers is what will attract people. This is what a lot of people will be looking at. Now you see, I really didn't wait for the gum to actually dry before I lay it. So one of the reason I did that is if I make any mistake, I want to be able to easily remove it without straining the leather because I actually use a synthetic leather. So if there is a mistake, I can easily put it out. That's the reason I'm doing this. Then I can easily manipulate my spread around. You see the way I'm using my hand to spread it. So that is actually the reason I did not wait for it to actually dry before gumming it. But One thing I discover is there is this part of the hedge that wasn't actually sticking with the landing. So I added gum to it, this particular place, add my gum to it. Then actually spread it to make sure that those other part actually get the gum. Then I decide to wait a bit before I closed it up. And you see that the folding disappeared, only that because of the softness of the leather I'm using, you could actually see the folding of my leather from the outside. You could actually feel that folding. Then I'm cutting out the excess of the landing that is showing under my leather. I'm cutting it out. So there are times you get a result like this. So all you need to do is just get your blade and cut it out smoothly in a way that it will look good. And you have to be very careful not to actually not to cut your main upper leather when you are doing that. So go ahead and do the second one also. Another thing I want to mention is if the landing showed at the side, you don't have to bother yourself about it. Please like this video, subscribe, like and share